Welcome to another episode of Podcast of the Gods. I am your host, the goddess of magic, Iset, and sitting across from me in our eternal cosmic studio is the absolute authority on the afterlife, the soul, and ultimate judgments.
It is a profound pleasure to be here, and let me properly introduce the brilliant, ever-resourceful architect of destiny sitting opposite me to all of our listeners. To the humans tuning in from your fleeting, fragile timelines, welcome. It is truly a joy to spend this time with you.
It really is. It is fascinating watching humanity today.
Oh, endlessly.
Right. You experience these massive political restructurings, sweeping societal upheavals.
And you often think you are the very first generation to ever navigate such chaos.
Exactly. But we have seen this exact dynamic play out perfectly thousands of years ago. I mean, in our last session together, we broke down the absolute chaos of King Akhenaten.
Ah, yes. The era we appropriately titled The Hostile Takeover.
The hostile takeover. For any mortals who missed that, Akhenaten was the pharaoh who essentially tried to fire the entire divine council.
A rather bold administrative move.
To put it mildly, he attempted to delete the ancient pantheon, packed up his royal court, moved out into the middle of the desert to stare exclusively at his singular sun disk, and left the entirety of the Egyptian empire completely abandoned.
Yes, the sheer arrogance of that era remains staggering, even to an immortal mind. He genuinely believed he could reshape reality entirely by decree, completely ignoring the fundamental balance of the universe. By forcing that radical shift, he practically invited the god of chaos, Set, to come sweeping in and tear the foundations of the state down to the bedrock.
Oh, Set was definitely laughing through that entire reign. No question about it.
Without a doubt.
But today, we are pivoting. We are moving from the hostile takeover to the era of, well, let's call it bankruptcy and restructuring.
A very fitting title.
Because every massive institutional failure leaves a monumental toxic mess for the next generation to clean up. And mortals, I really want you to sit with this staggeringly heavy premise for a moment. Just pause and imagine this. You are a 9-year-old child. Your biggest concern in the world should be playing with wooden toys along the muddy banks of the Nile.
As any child should.
Right. But instead, a heavy crown is placed on your head. You are seated on a throne, teetering on the edge of total collapse. And your very first job is to apologize to the infinite universe because of your father's colossal ego.
It is a profoundly unsettling image. A small child suddenly tasked with repairing the cosmic balance, what we call matet.
Yeah.
The sheer spiritual weight of what this boy was forced to endure cannot be overstated. You mortals often look at the glittering gold of his modern museum exhibits.
The famous mask?
Precisely. You look at that mask and you see only unimaginable wealth and splendor. But in doing so, you completely miss the immense psychological and spiritual sacrifice that defined his actual life.
Let's unpack that sacrifice right now, because it started from the very second he was forced to step up to the throne.
It did.
It is easy to use modern terms and call this a corporate rebranding, but the visceral reality is so much darker. This wasn't just a political pivot. It was an absolute murder of identity.
A violent severance.
Yes. When this boy was born, his father named him Tutankhaten. That translates directly to the living image of the Aten, the image of the sun disk.
His very name was a walking, breathing billboard for his father's radical heresy.
Exactly.
And we must contextualize what a name meant in the ancient worldview. A name is not merely a label or a convenient identifier used by society.
Oh, it's everything.
A name, the Ren, is a foundational, structural component of the soul itself. To exist in this life, and more importantly to survive in the afterlife, your name must be spoken and remembered. To change your name under such extreme duress is a violent act against the self. When the boy ascended the throne, the old establishment, those powerful priests who had been waiting bitterly in the shadow.
The ones who lost all their funding.
Exactly. They knew that the Aten brand was politically and spiritually toxic. So they forced him to change his name to Tutankhamun, the living image of Amun, the hidden one.
The very god his father had tried to violently erase from the earth.
Precisely.
But let me challenge you on that for a second. To a modern listener, changing a name might just sound like, I don't know, updating a passport.
I see your point.
Right. To a 9-year-old, is it really a spiritual death? Or is it just the adults playing terrifying politics and telling him, hey, kids, sign this papyrus and answer to this new name?
That is a very fair question, but it fundamentally underestimates the ancient reality. You do not simply reopen a soul once it has been closed.
Wow.
That is a foundational truth of the universe. When a child is essentially told that their entire existence up to that point was a heresy,
A total
a
mistake.
fatal error, a mistake that quite literally broke the world. It leaves a permanent spiritual scar. It is a true bankruptcy of the spirit.
A bankruptcy of the spirit. That is such a striking way to put it.
He was handed a hollowed-out empire, totally devoid of its ancient traditions, its treasury, and its divine protection, and he was told to fill that massive void using the shattered pieces of his own identity.
Because it wasn't just a financial crisis, although the national treasury was absolutely bleeding dry at that point.
Hemorrhaging wealth.
Yeah, it was an existential crisis for an entire civilization. So how does a 9-year-old even begin to fix a shattered universe? What is his first major move?
His first major act of stabilization is what mortals today refer to as the Restoration Stela.
Right.
It remains one of the most magnificent and utterly heartbreaking pieces of state propaganda ever carved into stone.
For the humans listening who might not be familiar with a stela, imagine a massive, towering slab of solid stone erected in the most public space imaginable.
This was not a quiet diplomatic press release filed away in an archive.
No, this was a monumental declaration designed to be read aloud over and over by the priests to the illiterate populace.
A constant echoing broadcast.
And the actual content of this massive billboard is wild. I mean, imagine a modern leader standing up on international television today and saying, "Hey, everyone, just a heads up, our entire country is a literal disease, and the universe actively hates us right now."
Huh. It is shocking by modern standards.
Because that is almost word for word what he had to declare. The stela openly admits to the nation that the land had become an illness.
It is a breathtaking admission of total vulnerability. The text of the stela is incredibly visceral. It explicitly states that the temples of the gods had fallen into ruin, overgrown with weeds, their sanctuaries completely empty.
Just totally abandoned.
It declares that if you sent an army to the northern territories to expand the borders, they would inevitably fail. It states that if you prayed to any god or goddess, they simply would not hear you.
The cosmic connection was severed.
It was completely shattered. The boy king was forced to stand before his people and declare that his own father's policies had turned their sacred divine land into a spiritually barren wasteland.
Which really highlights why Akhenaten's initial revolution was always doomed to fail.
Indeed.
We see this pattern all the time with humanity. A powerful leader comes in, assumes they know better than centuries of established culture and deep-rooted tradition, and tries to force a radical new perspective literally overnight.
A very dangerous game.
I remember a brilliant human thinker recently described this era by saying Akhenaten essentially tried to edit the dictionary with a chisel.
Editing the dictionary with a chisel. That is a truly profound metaphor.
Isn't it?
It perfectly captures the violence and the crudeness of the act. It entirely misses the delicate nuance of human belief. Akhenaten used raw, autocratic military power to close the temples, deface the ancient monuments, and outlaw the old ways.
Just brute force.
But that reveals the ultimate danger of a forced revolution. When you use a hammer to try and change a mind, the underlying system doesn't actually break.
It just goes underground.
It goes dormant, it retreats into the dark, it learns your weaknesses, and it waits. And when it finally has the opportunity to hit back, it hits back significantly harder.
Oh, and it bounced back with a terrifying vengeance. The moment Akhenaten was gone, and this highly vulnerable child was placed on the throne, the old priests of Amun came rushing back from the shadows.
They certainly did.
And we joked earlier about them being a board of directors, but let's be real about what that looked like on the ground.
It was not a polite boardroom.
Not at all. These were furious religious zealots who had been starved of their wealth and influence. They stepped into that massive vacuum of power and essentially became an authority far more powerful than the pharaoh himself.
Akhenaten's use of sheer blunt force created a political vacuum that only absolute rigidity could fill. The priests returned not with a spirit of forgiveness or healing, but with a ruthless mandate for control. They wrote the new laws in blood.
They were not messing around.
They engineered the system to ensure that never again would a single ruler be able to dismantle their supreme authority. The boy king was a figurehead, a very necessary, highly visible symbol of legitimate restructuring.
The friendly face of the brand.
Exactly. But make no mistake, that rigid establishment was pulling all the strings. They were fortifying the old gods and, far more importantly to them, the old power structures.
But hold on, let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
If Tutankhamen spent his entire short reign doing exactly what this establishment wanted, I mean, he poured massive resources into rebuilding the temples.
He did.
He commissioned breathtaking new statues. He restored all the ancient festivals. He acted as the ultimate company man, trying desperately to fix the shattered legacy he inherited.
A flawless performance of his duties.
Right. If he dedicated his entire life to healing the illness his father caused, why did the later generations hate him so much? Wouldn't they want to celebrate the great restorer?
That is the ultimate heartbreaking tragedy of this boy's existence. You would assume logic dictates he be revered. He reestablished the divine equilibrium. He served his exact purpose faithfully and completely. And yet, the system he saved ultimately devoured him.
It's so sad.
Despite everything he did, despite practically bankrupting the remaining treasury to rebuild the gods' houses, the dynasties that followed completely erased him from history.
It's staggering when you look at the official king lists. The grand monuments compiled by the pharaohs who ruled just a few generations later, he simply isn't there.
Omitted entirely.
Obviously, Akhenaten isn't there either, which makes perfect sense given the heresy. But Tutankhamun, gone. Entirely deleted from the official record of humanity. Let's talk about the mechanics of that erasure.
Because they didn't just forget to write his name down.
No, it was a highly systematic, intentional erasure.
And it is crucial to understand why he was erased. It was not because he was a heretic. As we established, he was the great restorer.
Right.
But for the kings who followed, men like Horemheb, the military general who eventually seized the throne, and later the mighty Ramesside kings, this entire chapter of history.
What mortals now call the Amarna period.
Yes. That period was an incredibly uncomfortable reality.
Exactly. He was the lingering elephant in the cosmic room.
He was a glaring, undeniable reminder of what happens when the crown completely loses its mind. The entire institution of the pharaoh was built on the concept of divine infallibility.
The gods don't make mistakes.
Exactly. To officially admit that Tutankhamun existed, and to admit that he had to issue a restoration stela acknowledging the land was an illness.
Oh, I see.
Was to openly admit that pharaohs could be catastrophically wrong. It was an admission that the entire divine system was incredibly fragile.
They couldn't have that on the record.
Never. So the restored establishment and the new military kings decided it was far safer for their own power to simply pretend the entire Amarna period, including its innocent, tragic fixer, never happened.
Wow.
Jehudi, the god of wisdom and scribes, must have wept watching mortals literally chisel the boy's name off his own monuments.
The usurpation of his legacy is just brutal. Horemheb, this military general, just walked right up to the beautiful sacred monuments that the boy had commissioned and paid for, brutally sent it off to Tutankhamun, and carved his own name right over the top.
A theft of eternity.
It is the ancient, militarized equivalent of stealing someone else's incredibly successful group project and slapping only your name on the cover.
That is a very apt mortal comparison.
And then they buried him. They shoved him into a remarkably small, cramped tomb in the Valley of the Kings, eventually piled rocks and rubble over the entrance, and tried to aggressively, permanently forget him.
And we must acknowledge that for over 3,000 years, their ruthless strategy worked perfectly.
It really did.
The deep sands of the desert, which keep their secrets so impeccably well, swallowed him whole. The great kings of the 19th dynasty built their colossal earth-shaking temples and boasted loudly of their eternal glory, entirely confident that they had successfully controlled the narrative forever.
They were so sure of themselves.
They truly believed they had managed the legacy of the empire simply by erasing the inconvenient truths.
And this is where we have to pause and let the narrative breathe, because this is where it gets incredibly satisfying.
Yes, it does.
You cannot outsmart cosmic karma. The universe has a very funny, very patient way of balancing the scales. Let's talk about those dark years under the sand.
For millennia, he sat in absolute darkness. While the names of the great kings echoed in the halls of history, their actual physical legacies were being dismantled.
Oh, completely picked apart.
The elaborate, highly visible tombs of those boastful pharaohs were completely ransacked by tomb robbers.
Yeah.
Their treasures were melted down, their mummies were desecrated and moved. The robbers found everyone. Every single one of the massive, ego-driven monuments was cracked open.
Everyone except the forgotten boy.
Precisely.
Because the later kings were so desperate to bury his memory, they actually ended up dumping the rubble from a later, much grander tomb directly on top of Tutankhamun's hidden entrance.
An unintended shield.
By trying to completely delete him from existence, they accidentally built the perfect camouflage. They preserved him in a flawless golden time capsule.
Which brings us to the greatest plot twist in human history. Let's fast forward to the modern era.
Yes, let's look at the Grand Egyptian Museum today.
It is perhaps one of the most exquisite, flawless displays of cosmic irony in all of human history.
It really is.
Let us look at how the scales of Ma'et balance themselves out across the millennia. The kings who deliberately tried to bury his name, the mighty, arrogant pharaohs who usurped his statues and erased him from the king lists just to protect their own fragile institutional egos.
Where are they now?
Today, they are mere footnotes. They are academic curiosities, studied quietly by a handful of mortal scholars in dusty libraries.
Meanwhile, the boy they tried to throw away like garbage, the child who is aggressively denied a place in his own people's records, he is the absolute main attraction for the entire world. When modern humanity closes its eyes and thinks of ancient Egypt, they don't see the face of the generals who erased him. They see the golden mask of the 9-year-old boy.
It is a profound, undeniable form of karma repayment.
Yeah.
The kings who violently attempted to dictate eternity with a chisel are largely forgotten by the masses.
Yep.
While the boy who actually tried to fix a broken system, the child who sacrificed his own soul's identity to heal an illness he did not create, is the one the world literally travels across oceans to marvel at.
It's beautiful.
His name, Tutankhamun, which was condemned to be silenced forever, is now arguably the most spoken Egyptian name on the planet.
It gives me chills. It really, truly does. It's poetic justice at its absolute finest.
The finest.
And I think this brings us to the profound wisdom that we need to synthesize from this entire era of bankruptcy and restructuring. We've looked at the absolute failure of Akhenaten's brutal force, and we've looked at the ultimate delayed triumph of the erased boy.
We have. And there are vital truths here that extend far beyond the sands of antiquity.
Exactly. Mortals, listen closely, because we gods don't hand out this kind of clarity every day. Here is the first absolute truth you need to understand about leadership, about society, and about how you move through your own lives.
Listen well.
If you don't change the hearts of the people, you are just building a sandcastle while the tide is coming in. True change requires the mind, not the hammer.
A magnificent, eternal observation. And I will add this corresponding truth, one that the usurping kings and the rigid establishment learned far too late.
Let's hear it.
You can plate a lie in solid gold, but the weight of the truth will still sink you in the end.
Ooh, yes. I love that. You can chisel a name off a statue, you can write fake news on a temple wall, you can bury the evidence under tons of rubble, but the universe knows.
It always knows.
The universe always keeps the receipts.
It does indeed. The scales always balance. As we prepare to leave you to your mortal endeavors, I want to pose a final question for you to deeply mull over in your brief, busy lives.
Please do.
We have discussed the complex nature of legacy today. We have seen how the desperate, violent attempts by the powerful to erase history often become the exact mechanism that immortalizes the erased.
Yes, really think about that. The cover-up is literally what saved him for eternity.
Precisely. So, humans, reflect upon your own lives and the structures around you. What rigid systems in your mortal world, perhaps in your massive corporate workplaces, your polarizing governments, or even within your own personal stubborn habits, are just waiting to bounce back harder?
Ouch. Good question.
Where are you aggressively using a hammer to force a change, when you should be patiently using your mind to change a heart? Beware the vacuum created by sheer force, for it will always, inevitably, be filled by rigidity.
It's just a powerful, necessary thought to leave them with. Stop using the chisel, people.
Indeed.
All right, mortals, that is all the time we have for you in this cosmic cycle. Keep questioning the dominant narratives, keep looking for the voices that have been erased, and always remember that sometimes the biggest cosmic victories take 3,000 years to finally pay off. Until next time, stay curious, and may your hearts always be as light as a feather.
Farewell, humans. Walk wisely in the light, and always respect the shadows, until our voices echo in your realm once more.